Good evening, Mother. Good evening, everyone. Tonight I want to talk to you about the Odyssey. This is not about a journey of the Odysseus in ancient Greek. So our journey is an historical search and spiritual search that has a great deal to do with the future of our organization. Starting with the elders' workshops in May of 1995, we looked into the future and asked ourselves, how can we best fulfill the mission of Church Universal and Triumphant? How can we carry out the directives of Jesus and El Moria and the Darjeeling Council? During many discussions and much dialogue that has taken place since that time, we have talked about what it means to be a communicant of the Church, what it means to be a community member, and how we can sustain the Guru-Chi relationship in a complex modern world. We looked at what it would take to make the Ascended Masters in a household word. We made an effort to understand the different needs and points of view of people in our society and throughout the world. We tried to assess our experience in the past and project ourselves into the future to determine what we should have to do now in order to be successful in the next millennium. Over time, the composition of the elders' workshops changed and broadened so that we could draw on the talent and experience of our members in the field. Our common pursuit was the best way to fulfill our common mission and vision. Along the way, we sought to understand what the Masters expected us to do. We were mindful of the pressure of time. We tried to better understand our own theology, something that is still in its embryonic stages. Throughout our search, we kept coming back to a single question. What must we do to enable the greatest number of people practice the teachings of the Ascended Masters? And that led to a second question. How should we change the culture and structure of the organization to make this possible? And while we want everyone to practice the teachings, whether or not they are a member of the Church, we also asked ourselves, how can we attract and retain new members? We are going through some of those changes right now. In my opening comments, I compare these changes to the changes that take place when your favorite supermarket goes through the process of expansion. And I alluded to the temporary inconveniences that go along with it. I also linked some of the challenges we are facing individually and as an organization to the necessary transitions on the path of self-actualization. To put our search into perspective, let me take you back to July 1966, when we talked about the transformations taking place at headquarters. At that time, some of you were ready and eager to start making changes locally, and we asked you to wait. We needed to get our act together at church headquarters before our changes could be made. Specifically, we had to first change our culture. Some people got impatient and wanted to know their new roles in this period of transformation. I then compared the situation to the Boston Marathon. We at headquarters were already being running, and you had to wait before we could move on. We really began to work together and to collaborate a year ago during the New Year's class. Those of you who were at the conference will remember that we asked you to fill out the survey and to tell us your most important and urgent needs. We continued this during the Easter conference, armed with a growing awareness of our need to create a culture of love. I facilitated the meeting with the leaders of the teaching centers and study groups. My goal was to discover what the leaders thought were the driving forces and restraining forces for the organization. We got a lot of information. What was missing the most for you was the heart flame and a warm and friendly feeling in the movement. So you too wanted the culture of love. So we had a kind of love in. In any case, the data in the surveys and our experience with the teaching centers and study groups leaders had an immediate impact on our then newly defined long-term goals and strategies. In fact, once we got your input, we changed several strategies on the spot so that we could meet your needs. But it also became apparent that we could satisfy the needs of our actual members and still not attract and retain new members. The problem was indeed our culture. Culture, as you know, tells us how to behave. It lets us know what is expected of us and what we should expect from others. Our culture, perhaps taken to the extremes at times, led some members to hold very high expectations for new members and seekers. Expectations that were too high and sometimes too rigid, which often chased new people away. We changed our culture and became more loving. And we have increased our understanding of society. For example, we have started to study the different needs of the three major age segments: the matures, the boomers, and the Xers. We have discovered and are studying the growth of a cross-generational segment of society called cultural creatives. This segment of society is both spiritual and self-actualizing. This information made it clear that we had to change our membership structure and our approach to seekers and get more involved in community building in order to attract and keep new members. Tonight, Debra Gruehl will talk to you about one of the building blocks of the New Beginnings, an exciting proposal for new membership structure. I strongly recommend that you take your pens in your hand and take notes while she talks, because we will be seeking your feedback after this presentation. Tomorrow, William Malek will talk to you about another building block of New Beginnings, an equally exciting community building initiative. But before they begin, I would like to revisit something I talked to you about in my opening comments. The transition process that has to happen before we can jump into the new beginnings. Debra and William will talk about the external changes we have to make. Things related to the new structures, new functions, new purpose, new objectives, new opportunities, new benefits, and new requirements, and so on and so on. What I'm talking about is the internal changes we have to make before we will be able to start those new beginnings. The internal changes. This is a psychological process we have to go through in order to come to terms with the new situation. Believe me, unless we make this transition occur first, the new beginnings will not work for you. Internal change requires us first to reframe or rethink your outdated mental models. Mental models is a term used by Peter Senge. It's also used by Joel Barker. He talks about your paradigms. The same meaning, mental models. Why do we have to reframe first? When we reframe or rethink, it enables us to change the way we see things. In fact, to see the future more clearly. It enables us to adjust our vision so we can see what changes we need to make. One of the keys to reframing is to draw forth a new or updated pattern from the etheric blueprint. This is a must before we can make or accept physical external changes. Now I want to share something with you that I believe I learned over the years as an organizational behaviorist. The starting point for transitions is not the beginning, but the ending. That's what we have to manage skillfully in order to leave the whole behind. In fact, psychological transitions depend on the letting go of the old reality first. So after Debra and William finish their presentations, we will have to determine what we think is over and what isn't. If we don't go through this exercise before we move forward with our new beginnings, then we are likely to run into one of the three equally serious difficulties. Difficulty number one. People will not dare to stop doing anything they are currently doing. They will try to do all the old things and the new things at the same time. I've seen this over and over again. After a while, people will burn out with the overload. Let's be honest. I think in our organization, in our church, we lost several beautiful souls and families because we ignored this concept. Second, people will make their own decisions about what to discard and what to keep, and the result will be chaos. Third, people will toss out everything that was done in the past, and the baby will disappear with the bathwater. So if we are wise, we'll do the following before we begin something new. Study the situation intently. Figure out how the proposed changes could impact your life and your community. Note how priorities have been reordered or will be reordered. Think about how we are trying to create a balance between spirituality, family, work, your personal health, how we are making time for ongoing learning, how this is essential to individual and organizational self-actualization, and essential to creating a community with a family culture of love. Decide what you want to focus on to leverage or increase your effectiveness. We live in complex times. I would like to give you a piece of advice. Simplify your life. Focus only on what is important. Eliminate all unnecessary activities from your life. Stop doing those things that do not contribute to your personal, to your family, or to your community mission, vision, and goals. Focus on doing the right things first. Ditch those duties that don't count for much, even if you can do them perfectly. Here is a second piece of advice. Change can be stress-producing, but you don't count on anyone else to relieve your stress. There is only one who can do that, and that's yourself. What should you do? Put yourself in charge of managing the pressure. You are the only one who will or even can lighten your psychological load. So I suggest that you learn to take charge of your circumstances and learn to turn stress into a creative tension. How do you do that? I will give you perhaps the most important key. Conquer your fear of becoming accountable. That fear will keep you from becoming empowered and self-actualized and from developing Christ consciousness. Once you become accountable for your thoughts, your feelings, and most of all your actions, you can become a free and independent person. Then and then only you can truly become a valuable and interdependent member of a greater community. This transition can be painful, but it is worth the effort. As so beautifully expressed in a fax I received last Sunday from Teresa Harvey, who is in among our midst today, I think. She wrote to me, "Dear Mr. Cleirbaut and staff, as I make my tie check out, I want to voice my full support for all the changes I see taking place in the church. I am grateful and excited to witness those changes that will surely usher in those millions of light bearers to our organization. God has promised, and God will deliver, if we but remain faithful. There is more I would like to say, but it is difficult. I am in human resources where I work. My organization is constantly reconfiguring and realigning itself. I am also on a major software implementation team, which is bringing major changes both to my organization and to the implementation team. These things are relevant to you as your background in human resources places them in context. You will know that I have been there concerning change. What I want to say is that I know that there must be tremendous pain in many areas of the headquarters organization right now. Considering the breadth and magnitude of the ongoing changes, anyone who knows change will know that there must be great pain. Many people are no doubt experiencing gut-wrenching, heart-shattering trauma. Such pain always results from such massive changes, at least here on Earth. It is perhaps the other side of the coin change. Speaking from both my human resource experience and my experience on the path, I want to speak out in favor of pain. Pain is a symptom of change, or of the need for change. When moved too deeply by work-related changes, I know that something is wrong with my values, priorities, or sense of self. It is quite possible to come out on the other side of the pain, and it will speak to us. Pain is just God in another guise. We are in control of our lives, and we are responsible for our own destinies. Too often in human resources we find that people rely on others, depend on others, and hold others responsible for some aspect of their work situation. There are many in the world who will complain, but few are proactive about their lives and their careers. The teachings are correct and true. They teach us to rely on ourselves and to take full responsibility for everything in our lives. This includes our pain. If it is too great, then that is a good indicator that change is required. Surrender, realign. As we listen to the pain and let it in, it will tell itself to the open heart. Those would seem to be some harsh words. To those, I would say, make pain your friend. It is not there to hurt you. God is not a cruel God. His love for you extends to offering you the same crown of thorns he offered his precious Son, Jesus. Rejoice first that you are worthy. Rejoice second that this too shall pass. Please take this letter as a gift and not a criticism or condemnation of any kind. My gift shall be small, but it is hard-won and motivated by love. With all my love, Therese Harvey. Isn't it a beautiful letter? So this far, we have only been discussing only one part of the transition process, the ending. The second step is a neutral zone. The neutral zone is the no man's land between the old reality and the new. It's the limbo between the old sense of identity and the new, the time of decay of the old and formation of the new. It's the place between those realities that we fear. Imagine for a moment that you are a trapeze artist. The neutral zone is like being between trapezes. You've let go of your old trapeze and you haven't gotten the grip on the new one. There is nothing to hold on to. At the very least, it's a time when the old way is gone and the new doesn't feel comfortable yet. This phase in transition process creates uncertainty. It creates confusion, error, and wild and fierce fanaticism. It takes time and sometimes seems like it will never end, like Moses leading his people for 40 years through the wilderness, or like a mother enduring 9 months pregnancy. She's uncomfortable no matter how many servants she has. Dear friends, in this step of the transition process, we must discover and count on the security of the flame within our hearts. We must discover the security in our threefold flame and mighty I am presence. Painful though it may be, the neutral zone contains those moments in time which best stimulate the individual's and organization's creativity, renewal and development. As we successfully navigate the neutral zone, new habit patterns which will help us adapt to the new reality begin to take shape. This is the time to restructure your mental models or paradigms and to give form to those new patterns. Once we have restructured and accepted our new mental models, our emotions start to kick in. We harness our desires and use the power of our feelings and enthusiasm to create a sense of revitalization. This enables us to adapt to and deal with the complexities of a changing environment. Only then will we start to see the gaps between where we are now and where we want to be or what we want to become. Only then will we be ready for new beginnings that we recognize as physical and spiritual renewal. So put all those things into perspective. The purpose of our new beginnings is clear. We want to lay the foundations for the expansion and growth of our church and make the Ascended Masters a household word. The output is the creation of a loving, spiritual, healthy, family-oriented, worldwide communities, where people want to become living examples of our teachings through self-actualization and self-transcendence. The ultimate outcome is enlightenment, mystical union with God, and your ascension. So please keep this in mind as you listen to Debra and William. Both led groups of elders and coordinated plans for new beginnings with the help of the full elders work group. They sought feedback from the National Outreach Committee, and beyond that, advice from a marketing firm called The Alliance, our partners in marketing. The Alliance is a powerful Bozeman-based organization led by Carol and Henry Gruehl and Michael and Kaylee Utter, all long-standing members of our church. One final piece of advice. Keep an open mind as Debra and William give their presentations. Think about the possible positive and negative consequences of the proposed models and give us your honest feedback. And tell us what you think we need to stop doing before we can start doing the new things. Remember that good endings make for good beginnings. As Henry Wadsworth Longfellow said, great is the art of beginning, but greater the art of ending. And also remember the words of the French writer Anatole. All changes, even the most longed for, have their melancholy. For what we leave behind is part of ourselves. We must die to one life before we can enter into another. As you can see, friends, new beginnings cannot be forced. They only can be encouraged, supported, and reinforced. Only then will we be ready for real change, the new beginnings of our physical and spiritual renewal. So I will ask now Debra to come up and give her presentation of our new beginnings. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gilbert, and good evening, everyone. Good evening, Mother. It's a great joy and privilege for me to be here with you this evening and to introduce to you a very exciting new model of affiliation. As Gilbert mentioned, during the last year, members of the Executive Board and the Council of Elders, together with a number of representatives from international ministry, have been working together as a workshop group to discuss issues relevant to the restructuring of our church. And Gilbert and William and others have kept you informed of those from time to time. We've had about 15 or 18 meetings to review and discuss input from you, our members, and to look at research about what spiritual seekers are looking for in an organization. And these efforts have all been aimed at determining the most spiritual, the most dynamic, and efficient structure for our church. We asked some very fundamental questions as we went about this work. For example, who are we as an organization? Are we a publishing house? Are we a spiritual fraternity? A worldwide church? Now, some people were surprised to say, you mean there was any question as to whether we were a church? Well, we didn't want to really leave any stone unturned, so we went back and looked at every fundamental question that we could. So by way of introducing my presentation tonight, I'm happy to report to you that we have all unanimously concluded that we are indeed a church. We are Church Universal and Triumphant. It's important to start with this when you talk about a new model of affiliation, because you would affiliate with a publishing house differently than you would a church. During October and November, as we were getting really into the meat of the matter of our deliberations, it became clear that the primary issue that needed to be resolved before action could be taken on many other restructuring issues including revision of the teaching center and study group bylaws and the election of local leadership, was the issue of church membership. And this meant looking at all of our current levels of affiliation, pearls of wisdom, keepers of the flame, communicants, and so forth, and evaluating whether they actually facilitated our growth as an organization or obstructed it. After lengthy review and discussion, and with input from with a group of local field leaders, as Gilbert mentioned, we've concluded that our entire organization, including our facilities, our services, our products, and even in some cases our attitudes, is geared more toward believers than seekers. In other words, most of what we do is geared towards those who are already members of our organization. Sometimes the jargon that we use is geared towards those who are already affiliated with us. And that in order to move forward, we needed to look at ways to throw open the doors and make our organization more inviting, more appealing to the spiritual seekers that were hoping to come on board. And in fact, the masters have told us for decades that need to come on board with us. In fact, we found that in our current model, there's really no way for a seeker to affiliate with our church without becoming a formal member, or in some cases without making drastic changes to their lifestyle. So in order to contact the millions, we concluded we had to create a structure that allows for greater numbers of spiritual seekers to affiliate with our organization without having to jump through so many hoops and without having to prescribe with certain codes of behavior in the beginning when they first contact us. We need a model of affiliation that helps people achieve their highest spiritual potential, starting at the point where they are in consciousness and taking them to an ever higher state of being. We want to help them move from thinking of themselves as merely human beings to understanding their lineage as spiritual beings, to understanding and achieving their highest potential. When we're revising our model of affiliation or considering it, we're not giving up our spiritual path or compromising the Master's teachings in any way. To the contrary, we must look at how we, as chelas and students of the Messenger, can make these teachings more available, more applicable, and more relevant to our members and to spiritual seekers today. We want to throw open the doors to those who are interested in learning about and actualizing our spiritual teachings, but aren't sure they want to make a commitment to any particular organization just yet. We need to give people the option or the freedom to choose. We need to create a program of classes to mentor spiritual seekers, inquirers, as well as our own members in the Ascended Master's teachings. What we have now by way of this are the Keepers of the Flame lessons and the Pearls of Wisdom. Yet we found that subscribing to the Pearls of Wisdom does not necessarily introduce the seeker to the vast array of teachings released by the Masters and the Messengers over the last 39 years. Mark and Mother have done a tremendous job as messengers in releasing these teachings. And as Mother continues in her role of releasing the Master's teachings to us, it's time for us, as her chelas, to be up and doing and to do our job, as the Masters have said, and create the lifelong path of spiritual learning for seekers and for our own members. It is up to us, not Mother, to create the classes that will facilitate a systematic study and a practical application of the Master's tremendous releases over the years. And it is up to us, the Master's students, to create the framework or the model that supports this lifelong path of spiritual learning. Last February, in his address commemorating the anniversary of his ascension, Beloved Danello spoke of the restructuring and the remodeling of our church. He said, quote, "In these days of great and major change in this organization, I am especially with you, one and all. I am grateful for much accomplishment, much sacrifice, a tremendous amount of work that has gone into the restructuring of this community. Because you have performed this work and shall continue to perform it, beloved, this Church Universal and Triumphant will endure for many, many, many centuries, yea, even unto the hour of the fulfillment of the reason for being of planet Earth. Setting then this momentum, setting this avenue that reaches almost to infinity, you can realize that whereas had you stayed with the old momentums and the old thought forms, you might not be here for any more than a number of years," end quote. Now that, I think, is a little bit of inspiration to help us get through the stress of change, as Gilbert outlined for us, because Linnell is telling us we actually have to change in order to move forward. There's no question about it. We want this church to far outlive all of us. To do so, we think we need to revisit our membership model, a little remodeling to ensure the glorious expansion of what has been given to us as a foundation. As we've heard from Linello, St. Germain, Jesus, and many others, the Masters support our remodeling effort, but we can't do it alone. We need your participation. What I am presenting to you tonight is a proposal for a new model of affiliation for Church Universal and Triumphant. This is not a finished product, but a model in the making. It is our heartfelt offering to you as a starting point for your consideration and feedback. Church Universal and Triumphant is your church. Therefore, we want to hear from you and are going to be inviting your input on the remodeling process. We understand, and as Gilbert has outlined already, that it may be difficult for some people to value or appreciate a new model or the need to even create a new model, and in fact you might not even like it. You might not think it will work, or that we need to, as we said, have made any changes. But nonetheless, we're here to show you tonight the model that we have come up with. Next slide. I'd like to begin with a quote from beloved Jesus from 1986 about our church. He said, "Beloved ones, institutions are necessary, but the church we have called Church Universal and Triumphant is more than an institution. It is drawn out of a blueprint and out of a reality in the kingdom of heaven that does already exist, and therefore its extension in the earth is in fact a citadel for the guarding of the mysteries." Now, St. Germain in 1991 also spoke to us about our spiritual foundation, the spiritual foundation of our church, and the importance of our church in the world today. He said, quote, "This activity is the culmination of all others we have sponsored. It is intended to be the culmination of all dispensations that have gone forth in 25,800 years. It can be all that you make it, all that you will it to be, all that you desire. You are the physical matrix. You are indeed the summit lighthouse. Thus remember that Archangel Michael did say upon the founding of this organization that this activity does have the greatest potential and endowment of any he had sponsored, since he did bring home the first root race. That is the cosmic matrix. That is the almost unlimited potential of this activity. And given that, keepers of the flame, would you want to be anywhere else?" Next slide, please. So, when we consider a model, we have to say first and foremost, is it congruent with the church's mission? So I'd like to take just one brief moment here and review for you the church's mission statement. Our mission is to publish and apply the teachings delivered by the Ascended Masters to their messengers, Mark L. Prophet and Elizabeth Clare Prophet, and their anointed successors, in order to restore the original one-on-one relationship between the soul and God, and to liberate the souls of planet Earth. The mission, then, is our key to moving forward. The key words, I think, in our mission statement, and the ones that probably we will remember off the tip of our tongue, is to help people attain and sustain their one-on-one relationship with God. We ask ourselves as ministering servants, are we, on a daily basis, helping others to attain and sustain their one-on-one relationship with God? Are we ourselves attaining and sustaining our one-on-one relationship with God? The Masters have told us that we have to, in order to fulfill our mission, reach out and contact millions of souls with these teachings. There are a number of questions then we need to ask when we consider this. What role should the church play in the lives of members and seekers? How should the church be structured to fulfill this role and achieve its mission? And how will seekers and students affiliate or join our organization? How do we appeal to broad numbers of people? How do we make the teachings more practical for people? How do we simplify the teachings? How do we provide services and products for people that will add value to their lives? And how do we expand and grow as an organization without compromising our standards or the teachings? Now, Gilbert mentioned that we had looked at several segments of society, including the matures, the boomers, and the Xers, and the phrase he also used was a cultural creatives, which is another way of defining spiritual seekers. And we realized that each segment, as Gilbert described them, has their own unique set of needs. If we were to interview them all and say, what are your needs, or what would you like fulfilled through a spiritual organization, they might be somewhat different. But when you put them all together and create an intersection of them, there are common needs among all of these groups. I'd like to speak just for a moment about spiritual seekers, because I think sometimes we forget about the untapped market of people that are out there, the people whom the masters are asking us to contact. And it also gives us some insight to the degree to which people are willing to go to find a one-on-one relationship with God. Now, I'm stealing this from Gilbert, and it was a snapshot that he told us about from USA Today, and it profiled millionaires who had set aside at least $2.5 million already. These are high achievers, very successful people. And the questions were put to them: what is it you would like to achieve in your life, and how much would you like to spend on that? Number one, they'd like to have a one-on-one relationship with God. And they said they'd be willing to spend $250,000. Number two, they said they wanted to be loved and to love. And they would spend $400,000 on that. Now, these are people who have it all in the material sense and can afford to pay whatever they want to pay for spiritual fulfillment. For self-actualization is another way to put it, for achieving their potential spiritually. And this is what they would be willing to pay to have those things which thus far have eluded them. We are sitting on a veritable gold mine with the Ascended Master's teachings. Millions of people, especially baby boomers, are looking for personal fulfillment. And this is generally true of most spiritual seekers. Helping people achieve personal fulfillment, this is what we can do through the Ascended Master's teachings. This will benefit families, communities, and nations. A spiritually fulfilled individual can contribute significantly to his community and to the world at large. Let's take a look then at what these individuals are saying they'd like. Number one, their top need: rebuilding spiritual community. Next, understanding the process of lifelong learning for enhanced spirituality and achieving one's spiritual potential. Notice the word lifelong before learning. It's recognized among this group and these combined groups that the process of learning never ends. Next, feeling strengthened through my communion with God. Next, how to sustain my connection to life, whether that's humanity, nature, or God. They express it in different ways. Next, a deeper understanding of religious mysteries. A heightened understanding of my divine plan, my sacred labor. Next, motivation to be love in action. A sense of contribution to my community. Fellowship and opportunities for service. We feel that if we can create an organization that provides for all of these needs, that our potential for growth is virtually unlimited. Next slide. As I mentioned, we're sitting on a veritable gold mine. We have unique tools that no other organization has. We have teachings on the path of the ascension and the path of personal Christhood. We have an understanding of our God identity, our own I Am Presence and Holy Christ Self. We have the dictations from the Ascended Masters. We have the knowledge of the violet flame and the science of the spoken word for personal and world transformation. We have the Guru-Chela relationship. Now, if you think of these as our gold mine and things that we have in our pocket, And we know that where we want to go is to reunite with God in the ritual of the ascension, or to achieve union with God. Pretty much, I think the dilemma that faces all of us, not only as members, but especially seekers, is how do we get from the left side of the cliff to the right side of the cliff? How do we take this great, vast knowledge that we have, and what do we do with it to achieve our ascension or to achieve union with God? And I liken this sort of to going into a supermarket. Gilbert introduced us to the supermarket model. But imagine if you went into the supermarket to buy a week's worth of groceries, but there weren't any signs in the store. None of the aisles were marked, and all of these things in the store were mixed up. So in one aisle you could find butter and chicken and lettuce and sponges and spick or span, and there's no guide to where to go. But you have to go into the supermarket and buy all of your groceries for dinner. It would take you some time to find the appropriate things. And then you would get them all home, but there's no recipe for how you're supposed to make dinner. You just have to figure it out, and you don't know how long it's supposed to be in the oven. Without any signposts along the way, without a recipe for success, chances of achieving a one-on-one relationship with God or reuniting with God in the ritual of the ascension are slim. We have recognized that this is one of the weakest areas of our organization, and where we need to spend the most emphasis is helping people to apply the teachings of the Ascended Masters in their daily lives so that they can attain and sustain a one-on-one relationship with God, so that they can cross this abyss and get to where they need to go. This slide here shows people sort of doing what they can to cross the abyss on their own. Some people take a rock pick and climb up themselves, and some cross the tightrope. We believe that correcting this shortfall is the key to our growth and expansion. And I'd like to reiterate that this is not the job of Mother, or has not been the job of the messengers over the years. The Masters have told us it is our job to help people apply the teachings of the Ascended Masters. It's a big enough job just to release them and edit them in written form. And I'd like to give a round of applause again to Mother for her steadfastness over the years in releasing these teachings to us. Helping others achieve their Christhood is the true meaning of ministration and service, and the essential role of our church. We feel that with the right model, we can enable millions to cross the abyss, to apply the Master's teachings, and to establish a one-on-one relationship with God, and to ultimately ascend. On August 10th of 1997, Archangel Michael said, "There are higher levels, and you can leap to them. You can find them. You can know a transcendence. Know that empowerment, for I come for the founding, for the protection, for you going forth in that sense of a new model. What is your model? Find it out. That model, beloved, can take you to places you have not been to." Now, I have to confess that we didn't find this quote from Archangel Michael until we had already proposed a model of affiliation. And we're also, I will confess, quite delighted to find it afterwards, because we knew that then we were on the right track. Next slide. I'm going to walk you through then a couple of the objectives that we sought to meet as we created this new model. In consideration that application of the teachings is one of the things we needed to focus on the most, we wanted to create a new model or a structure for affiliation and membership that would provide more opportunities for people to study and apply the teachings, attend worship services, and affiliate with our organization without having to become a formal member. We also wanted to create distinct benefits and opportunities for that affiliation in order to attract seekers, spiritual seekers, including cultural creatives, as Gilbert mentioned. We also wanted to account for the needs and interests of existing members. We're not forgetting anybody who's already a member of our organization, as well as the needs of teaching centers and study groups, and to facilitate the growing process of new and existing members, the spiritual growing process. We also wanted to create a model which did not connect spiritual attainment with any level of affiliation and which would be in sync with the new culture and direction of the church. So, what did we do? As I mentioned, we analyzed all the research data in the field input. We looked at the needs, which I showed you a couple of slides back, and then we looked at our existing membership model, our existing structure, and said, how does this affect the growth of our new members, the spiritual growing of our members, as well as spiritual seekers? We also went back and looked at dozens of statements and quotes from the masters on the purpose of our church and also on church affiliation. We also took some time to research other organizations such as ARE, such as Self-Realization, and some other major mainstream churches to look at what they're doing that's made them successful and say, is there anything they've done that we could also adopt or modify for our use? We then compared the master's objectives with the needs of our existing and prospective members. We also wanted to consider if cyberspace membership was possible. When we went on Deepak Chopra's webpage, he had a whole level of affiliation whereby people never had to actually physically be present or even state any outer connection with his organization, but they could affiliate through cyberspace. And he had somewhere in the neighborhood of 40,000 individuals who affiliate with him just through the internet. So we're saying, can we create a model that also allows for affiliation through the internet? And as Gilbert mentioned, we looked at the different needs of matures, boomers, and Xers and wanted to consider, is this model adaptable to different cultures around the world? One church that we looked at in particular is called the Saddleback Valley Community Church. It was founded by a man named Rick Warren in 1980, who moved to California with no money, arrived at a real estate agent at 5 o'clock in the afternoon and had no place to stay. The real estate agent found him a place to stay, a condominium, and a couple of short months later he held his first church service in his own living room. 10 years later, they have over 10,000 people attending church on an average Sunday. They have a 74-acre, spacious, beautiful campus and 1,500 lay ministers in their community. When we read these statistics, we asked ourselves, what did Rick Warren do that we can learn from? And interestingly, what he said in his book, The Purpose-Driven Church, which we've studied extensively, he said, quote, "The problem with many churches is that they begin with the wrong question. They ask, what will make our church grow? This is a misunderstanding of the issue. The question we need to ask instead is, what is keeping our church from growing? What obstacles and hindrances are preventing growth from happening? All living things grow. You don't have to make them grow. And since the church is a living organism, it is natural for it to grow if it is healthy. The task of church leadership is to discover and remove growth-restricting diseases and barriers so that natural, normal growth can occur." So, what are the barriers to our growth? Not what will make our church grow, but what's standing in the way from our church growing. So we took a look at our existing membership structure, and very loosely that's defined as pearls of wisdom, keepers of the flame, and communicants. Essentially, if you're affiliated with our organization, you're probably affiliated at one of those levels. Now, you might want to jot down some of these because we're especially going to be asking you, do you think these are relevant? Do you think they're accurate? This is what we've identified as some of the top problems with our existing organizational structure. The reason we've isolated them is because these are the barriers to church growth that we found. First of all, we felt the purpose of our church was not well defined. Everybody should know what our mission statement is, but beyond that, they should know why they're a member of our church, if they are. And we found that many people could not articulate why they are a member of Church Universal and Triumphant. The next problem we discovered was that we didn't really have a step-by-step program for newcomers. We needed a better introduction to the teachings. We thought that the levels of membership as they are now were confusing. And as I mentioned, that the current structures were geared more towards believers than seekers. That's another area where we'd like your feedback. Do you think that that is the case, that we are geared more towards believers than seekers? Next slide. Levels of commitment for different membership levels are not understood by people. And as we've mentioned before, and we'll say it over and over, we feel the hurdles are too high for new people, for new students, especially Pearls readers, to feel a part of the church. For the Keepers of the Flame, we feel that benefits are fairly undefined, that there are no perceived benefits after Lesson 31. This is what our surveys have told us. And we don't really know our target customers and their needs. Next slide. We also feel that inherent within our structure is something that sort of categorizes people into a better than, less than category, people feeling that they've sort of arrived when they've reached a certain place, that communicants are better than keepers, who are better than Pearls readers. And we wanted to create a model that got away from this sense of hierarchy. Sometimes members have a hard time, communicants, for example, keeping up with the commitments that they've made, and they don't feel there's any way that they can back down from that, and so they quit. We wanted to create a model that gave people an opportunity to move around as they felt they could. In other words, there was a way for them to step back if they needed to. As we already mentioned, one of the other problems with the model, is there's no way for a systematic study of the teachings by a new student. At the Norfolk conference, you told us, 80% of you that participated in our surveys said that you're happy with the membership model, but you didn't understand it. I guess that means ignorance is bliss or something like that. You felt like levels of membership were defined by, quote, what people can't do, end quote. You know, keepers can't do some things that Pearls readers can, and then communicants can't do some things that keepers can. But other than that, people had a hard time saying, well, what's the difference between a communicant and a keeper? Well, a communicant can't blank, blank, blank. You say, so that's really not a good model for moving forward. And you also said that you wanted change, but you wanted that rules and levels didn't matter to you. You wanted something that would facilitate personal growth. One of the other drawbacks that we found with the model is that the Keepers of the Flame fraternity has come to be seen as a level of membership in the church. And if you take the Keepers of the Flame fraternity brochure, it will state in there that it is a spiritual fraternity and that people can belong to it as a spiritual fraternity and be a member of any other church of their choice. So along the way somewhere, Keepers of the Flame has come to be seen as a level of membership, and we think that's actually a drawback, that it should stay as a spiritual fraternity, and we should see membership as separate from that. Now, I would like to say that we considered that the former model may have served the needs of current members, but wasn't necessarily the most effective model for growth and attracting new seekers. So again, we're looking at a new model that will not only serve the needs of existing members, but seekers. We all have a common vision. It's to make the Ascended Masters a household word. And if the formal model was restrictive, if it didn't invite participation at an introductory level, we can't make the Ascended Masters a household word. For example, some of you may have had the experience, you have a husband or a wife who would like to worship with you on a Sunday and perhaps even join the church, but can't because they can't agree to all the levels of discipline to church membership. Again, the systematic study of the Master's teachings. There is none in the current membership model. We feel that in order to grow and expand as individuals and as a congregation, as a church, we need to provide a model that spiritually grows our members. Now, when you go to a huge university and you decide to become a major in the fine arts or a major in biology, let's say you're at UCLA or the University of Michigan, and there's hundreds and hundreds of classes. Usually you have an advisor that helps you select your classes for your major so you can graduate. Where are our advisors? We have hundreds, or could have, hundreds of classes on the Ascended Master's teachings, everything from prosperity to the ascension, the science of the spoken word, the history of the Great White Brotherhood, the messengers. Just think of all the hundreds of classes we could have, but where are the advisors that are helping people select their classes and grow, helping them to graduate, which is another way of saying helping them to achieve their ascension. Helping others to assimilate the foundational teachings of the Ascended Masters and apply them in their lives is our job. The Masters have told us this. Talk to people at the level at which you find them. Know the world's religions so that you can assist a Buddhist or a Hindu in their understanding of the Master's teachings. We've been told this over and over again. Next slide. One of the other drawbacks of the model, which I have not yet mentioned, is that we weren't focused enough, as Gilbert has already mentioned, and we will reiterate, on the family, and especially the spiritual growing of children and youth. So one of the other great considerations of our model is that it would enhance the spiritual growth of families, and especially the religious education of our children and youth from age 0 to 18 and beyond. Now, you're going to be hearing a lot about this term, lifelong learning process, and I believe Mother's going to speak to you a little bit about this at the conclusion here tonight. But when we talk about practical spirituality, taking the Master's teachings and applying them, we're talking about walking through a number of steps. These steps of spiritual progression are often known as self-awareness, understanding who we are in God, self-knowledge, which is enhancing our understanding of the Master's teachings, self-actualization, the application of these teachings, and then self-transcendence, where we get to the point of union with God, we get to enlightenment, and ultimately the ascension. I'd like to mention a few words about self-actualization. It sounds more like a business concept, maybe, than a spiritual concept, but is very much a spiritual concept, especially if you cap the S on self, and realizing that what we're talking about is actualizing or becoming our higher self. It is definitely a spiritual process. We live in a world where people are searching for greater meaning and fulfillment in their lives, greater joy and success in their families, their relationships, their careers, their lifestyles, health, environment, overall their quality of life. Self-actualization is actualizing the untapped inner potential of self. This is how we feel individually fulfilled. Until we tap that potential, that inner resource of our higher self, we won't find personal fulfillment. We find it as students of the Masters through the Masters' teachings, and we know that this is a spiritual fulfillment. When we choose, or individuals choose, to become who they are in God, when they choose to actualize their highest potential, they transcend their ordinary existence and experiences and are able to offer to their families and communities spiritual gifts of love, peace, compassion, and sacred relationships. They can offer keys of wisdom, understanding, and enlightenment. In short, they help others achieve their highest potential and co-create a world where Golden Age can come a reality. All of humanity becomes their beneficiary. Healing and rebuilding society is related to healing the self, physically and spiritually. Just as a point of reference, how many of you here would say then that you were in the process of self-actualization? People look around and see how many hands are raised. That's virtually everybody. And since the term is tossed about so much, I thought it was worth defining in terms of the Ascended Master's teachings and our spiritual path. As we prepare to enter the age of Aquarius, we realize that each of us is called to put on our Christhood. It is the bonding to Christ through which we become the vehicle of God's love and compassion. Since each soul is created out of God's love, her deepest nature is love. She will not find personal fulfillment until she returns to love. And a return to love is a love that is expressed only in action. If we do not serve others in love, we have not returned to love. So the highest self-actualization then, the highest expression of ourselves in God, is our return to divine love. The new model is based on creating an organization of love and support, one which nurtures individuals and families in actualizing their highest potential and in expressing their divinity in their communities and the world. At this point, we have a handout for you. I'd like to ask the ushers to please pass out the handouts to members in the congregation. So if you'd please turn to page 2 of your handouts so that you're looking at the same slide that is currently on the screen. Okay, so what you see here is a diamond, and it's pictured on the slide in 4 different colors. And there are 4 sides to the diamond, and they are universal fellowship, community members, community service, and universal service. Now remember, we said that inherent in the new model is the lifelong path of spiritual learning. We need to grow members spiritually. So just because we've become a member doesn't mean we stop growing. What I want to point out first, while we're at the stage of the diamond, is that universal fellowship is where people first enter the organization and can affiliate without having to join or become a formal member. If they decide to become a member, they can move on and become a community member. Community member is the only level of membership in the church. What this diamond shows you are ways in which people can use their membership or affiliation to learn and serve in the Ascended Master's teachings. Now if you flip to the next page, top of page 3, you'll see that inherent in every side of the diamond is this path of lifelong learning that we talked about: self-awareness, self-knowledge, self-actualization, and then self-transcendence, or what's also known as union with God or enlightenment. Each and every area of affiliation has this path inherent within it. Next slide. The idea is that you can achieve union with God from any area of affiliation. We're not saying you have to be a member. We're not saying you have to be in universal service. You can achieve union with God from any side of the diamond. That's what the slide on the bottom of page 3 shows you. As you rise up from self-awareness to self-knowledge to self-actualization, and remember, self-actualization is achieving your highest potential and applying that in the world. As you rise up the pyramid of being, you can attain union with God, and you can do that from any area. This is extremely important because we want to point out it decouples spiritual attainment from area of affiliation. The 4 areas of affiliation then become the base of the pyramid. Participants can self-actualize or make their ascension from any area. And a quote which is apropos to this: the person who has the faith to move mountains and dies 6 weeks later has moved mountains for 6 weeks. That may have been enough for him. In other words, someone may be practically ascended when they find the Ascended Master's teachings and just need the knowledge of the violet flame for 6 weeks to make their ascension, while others may have a need to be of great service to the world for 20 or 30 or 40 years. We're attempting to meet the needs of all of these individuals, from the one who comes in at universal fellowship all the way to the one who continues in the lifelong path of spiritual learning and goes on to universal service. Inherent then in every area of affiliation is a path of study and practical application of the Master's teachings. For example, if you can look at your diamond again with the 4 sides. Let's imagine, just for example, that we had, as in universities, different levels of classes. There were 100 level classes, 200 level classes, 300, and so forth. Your 100 level classes for universal fellowship would be intended to lead people to the teachings of the Ascended Masters and to begin to teach them about church membership. As someone was ready to become a church member then, they would become baptized and sign or agree to a basic membership covenant. They would then be eligible for the next level of classes, whose goal would be to grow people to spiritual maturity, helping them to achieve a one-on-one relationship with God through the Master's teachings. The next level of classes, which is community service, and I'm going to do this in a little bit more detail in a minute. I'm giving you a brief overview. At the 300 level, for example, we would want to equip people with the skills they need to discover and perfect their dharma or their sacred labor, to find their personal ministry to life. And at the 400 level classes, it would be to enlist people to the mission of outreach, preaching the word of the Ascended Master's teachings to others through personal witnessing or testimonies or even stumping and lecturing. Now, when you join Church Universal and Triumphant today as a communicant, which, as you know, if you've attempted to join in the past 6 months, we have put that on hold. But there is no systematic class that you can take to learn about church membership. It's sort of a catch as catch can. We think that it's important for people to know why they're joining Church Universal and Triumphant and what that means to them in their life. So, for example, we might offer a class, knowing about our church, our purpose statement, why we exist, our vision statement, what we intend to do, our faith statement, what we believe, our value statement, what we practice. How many members today could articulate or answer all of those areas? Everybody look around, there's one hand raised. See, it would be good for all of us to go through a class like that and be of one mind and one body when we articulate to the world who and what we are as students of the Ascended Master's teachings. If we have 100 definitions of what that is, how will we provide for longevity of these teachings in the centuries to come? So, sign them up. Everyone's ready for Membership 101. Then we might, for example, review the Church's history, a brief history of Church Universal and Triumphant. Our path of lifelong learning, introducing you that to help you grow spiritually. We might talk about foundational elements of the Master's teachings, like Moria's worldwide ashram, the science of the spoken word and the violet flame, the history of the Great White Brotherhood, the messengers, and so forth. And finally, just prior to becoming a church member, if someone's ready, they may take a class on our church's structure, how our church is organized for growth, avenues or ways to affiliate, what it means to be a member, understanding baptism and communion, and understanding the sacraments. You know, as an aside, when we were looking at our model, there were 7 of us who broke off and formed a membership committee, and we all went around the table and said, what does communion mean to you? Holy Communion. And we had 7 different definitions. And then when the elders sat and talked about baptism, we had another 7 or 8 different definitions of what baptism meant. So we think it's important for everybody to have a common understanding of what these basic sacraments mean in our church. They might also have a class on stewardship and tithing, educating people spiritually so that they can move forward. That gives you an idea of what the lifelong learning path of practical spirituality might look like as people go around the diamond and decide to affiliate at different areas. Now, it's known that you can't graduate from college with a degree in biology if you only take classes in art history. So we know that there are going to be foundational classes for each area of affiliation or area of service. And this is one area, by the way, where we would like to invite your participation. This is where we would like to hear from you. What classes do you think someone in Universal Fellowship should be taking? And what classes do you think someone who's a church member and wants to grow spiritually should be taking? Now, we're not talking about the kind of Summit University classes where you have to pass a 5-page written test and get an A in order to move forward. We're talking about classes that are informal and are interactive and have discussion groups so that people really have a heartfelt understanding. So again, the lifelong learning path, this is something where we're going to be inviting your participation. As you can see, if we took the whole panoply of the Master's teachings and tried to put all of these teachings in different areas, it's a huge project. And we know that many of you out there have already done some of this work and have been offering classes for years. So we're going to be soliciting your input in a very concerted and unified way so that we can come up with the best model of classes, the best structure of classes to grow people. Now I'd like to have you turn to your next page of your handout, which should be entitled Universal Fellowship. We have 4 pages to illustrate for you the ways in which people can apply the teachings of the Ascended Masters. As I mentioned, there's only one level of membership, that's community member. There's also another way to affiliate, which is Universal Fellowship. And after one has become a member, he or she can make the choice to move forward in service, and I'll explain that to you here now in greater detail as we go through. So is everybody on the page titled Universal Fellowship? What is the goal at this level? It's simply to have an understanding of who you are spiritually, unlocking the power of your higher self and understanding your divine plan. Application of the violet flame and the spoken word. Somebody could do this on the internet. We could have people affiliating with us in Zimbabwe or any country virtually around the world. They would never have to necessarily come to the United States. We could have chat groups online. We could even have decree groups online giving the violet flame. Imagine what's available to us through technology. There is no reason why in the decades ahead we couldn't have hundreds of millions of members affiliating with Church Universal and Triumphant at the level of universal fellowship, giving the violet flame around the world in an anticorona of light that would literally transform the globe. Now, we had a mission. We've had many of them, but one from John the Beloved in 1990. He said, quote, "May you seek the new students of the Ascended Masters by announcing in your local newspapers or in publications a new meditation group forming so they might come to your meeting and know what is the meaning of a worldwide ashram that requires no signing of papers, no membership in the outer, no disaffiliation from any other organization, only the application of the heart, and these meditation rituals given by El Moria." Whether we do that locally in our communities or on the internet, it is possible to contact hundreds of millions at that level. Universal Fellowship then has no pledges, no requirements. The church's function at Universal Fellowship is simply outreach, teaching, and fellowship. It's our role here as church members to release the knowledge of the Master's teachings. It's not our role here to monitor someone's spiritual progress. It's simply to express the love of our heart and express the teachings. Now, what you'll see on each page is a table of opportunities and benefits for adults on the left and opportunities and benefits for children, youth, and family. What I wanted to point out here now, and I'm asking you to write it down in your handouts so that this is not forgotten, is that as we move forward, the opportunities and benefits are carried with you. In other words, as you go from Universal Fellowship to community membership, you have all the benefits of Universal Fellowship and the benefits of community members. As you move from community members to community service, you have all the benefits and opportunities of Universal Fellowship, community members, and community service. So they're progressive as you go through that. So if you'd like to make a note, that's not actually written there in any overt way, so you might want to jot that down. Opportunities and benefits, you can read these. I'll read a couple aloud. Fellowship, sense of belonging to a spiritual community, the Antakarana, as Amoria told us. An opportunity to study the Master's teachings, attend conferences, worship services, and at this area, people could have the sacrament of marriage, Holy Communion, and anointing of the sick. Then they could possibly take the community membership course of study. I say possibly because it would be an elective, something that they might choose to do, the class that I read the outline of. Now, please note, especially if you're a family member, the opportunities and benefits that we'd like to institute or make available for children, youth, and family. And you'll see these on every area, every page. Age-appropriate religious education, spiritual parenting classes, family worship services, Sunday school, activities for children and youth such as sports and recreation and social activities, a conference children's program, and fellowship. Now, the executive board considered how we were going to focus on children, youth, and family, especially in the coming year and in our upcoming July conference. And it was their conclusion that in order to give this area emphasis, we needed to have an entire team dedicated to creating these programs and these opportunities for youth and family. And so we have a proposal in now for a new team for children, youth, and family ministry of 7 individuals who will focus on this area as well as some other areas that are yet to be determined after your feedback for children, youth, and family. And we think that is very exciting. Okay, let's move on to community membership, your next page. Again, always notice it's practical spirituality. What's practical? What's in it for me? Here's where you can begin to apply the Master's teachings for personal transformation and family growth. Requirements: you need to complete the community membership course if you wanted to become a community member. And again, remember, this is where you become a formal member of the church. There would be a community membership covenant. This is yet to be determined. It may be the current church tenets. It may be a revision of the church tenets. At present, this has not been determined. This is something else we'd like to have your feedback on. You can see there's going to be many areas where we're requesting your feedback. And perhaps as we go through here, you could even create a box or a check mark or something that says, this is where we're looking for feedback. Also, to be a community member, which is a member of our church, there would be a pledge to tithe. And prior to someone becoming a community member, they would have classes on stewardship and tithing so they understand the meaning of tithing before they begin to tithe. Now, the church's function here is worship, edification, and community fellowship, spiritual empowerment of individuals and families, and youth and family ministry. And you can take a moment there to review the opportunities and benefits, not only for adults, but then for children, youth, and family. Community service. Now remember, anybody who chooses to move to community service must first be a member of the church, which is now called a community member. This is where we would apply the Master's teachings for the building of spiritual community. Completion requirement, completion of the community service course of study, and the community service covenant. Again, we have not written a covenant for this. We imagine it would be a combination of our principles and values and tenets, church tenets, and perhaps something else along the lines of serving one's community, but it is yet to be developed. The church's function here is to build spiritual community and service to others. People who, for example, might be in this area would be decree leaders, trustees of study groups or teaching centers, those who might want to teach Sunday school. In other words, this is the area where you really discover your personal ministry. Remember when I said in the Saddleback Church they had 1,500 lay ministers in their community? That's 1,500 people who are serving their community, their local church. So at this area, these are people who have said, I'm a member of Church Universal and Triumphant. I would like to take classes so that I can discover my personal ministry in life, my personal dharma. I need some help. Are there teachings from the Masters that can help me here? And yes, there are. And we can create classes for that and help people serve and build spiritual community. That's what this area is all about. And as you can see in the opportunities and benefits, you'd have classes to develop your personal ministry and gain the skills needed for that, administration and service in spiritual community. This is where one would become eligible for the Council of Elders and eligible to take then the Universal Service course of study. Now, I wanted to make a distinction here because we're saying the word ministration and ministering, that all of us, as the Masters have told us, are ministering servants. What we're talking about here is serving without the formal title necessarily of reverend. Mother even said to us, this is a quote from Mother from past years on why we're always ministering servants. She said, quote, I urge you to consider the vastness of the ramifications of yourself as a ministering servant, perhaps not formally by the title of reverend, but in your everyday motions. You are a ministering servant from the time you awaken in the morning. You minister with angels. You minister to life. You serve in your jobs, in your employment. You are ministering to all kingdoms of God every moment, waking and sleeping. Some people know that it is their mission to minister to others, but not necessarily as their profession. And the distinction here is that ordained ministers are those who see the ministry as their calling, as their profession, as their career. Whereas there are hundreds of others who simply see ministry as their sacred labor, as something they do in addition to their career as a computer programmer or in addition to their career in hospice. Do you follow me on that one? Okay. Al Moria said in 1992, you must also see to it that in your administration of your church and its activities, you decide on a worldwide basis what charity you are determined to make your own. And when you do, polish it, prepare for it with professional training, if need be, and become a part of that particular service to the world. So those who would like to move on and contribute to their own spiritual communities would go and take classes in community service. Again, these would be people who are already community members or members of the church. The next area on your next page is universal service. Again, you're a community member, you're a member of the church, and you've decided you've served as a decree leader, you've taught Sunday school. Boy, these are the greatest teachings. You feel a deep calling and a deep resonance in your being to go now and evangelize, to do outreach, to lecture and preach on the Ascended Master's teachings. So we would prepare you then in this area of universal service to go and preach and teach the word of the Ascended Masters in communities around the world. For example, you may be working in hospice, and if you enter this area of universal service, we would teach you how to do hospice in the context of the Ascended Masters' teachings. We're not going to be teaching you hospice, we're going to be teaching you how to evangelize or how to teach the Master's teachings. So this area is for those who have a deep commitment to outreach, to speaking the word of the Ascended Master's teachings. There are many people who are already doing this. Now, I would like to give an example, and I've asked his permission, of someone going through the various areas of affiliation and how this might work, because probably your first question is, well, gee, where do I fit in? Now that I've said that to you, is anybody who hasn't asked that question yet? Okay, so how does this happen? Somebody contacts the church, they read a book, they go on our website, and they want to affiliate with Universal Fellowship. Jean, how many years ago was that for you? How many? 20. So 20 years ago, Gene Vosser found the teachings of the Ascended Masters and decided this might not be a bad thing, and he wanted to loosely affiliate in Universal Fellowship. So after a while of applying the Master's teachings and the science of the spoken word, maybe a couple of years, he decides he wants to become a church member. When did you become a communicant, Gene? How many years after you found the teachings? So after about a year in Universal Fellowship, Gene decides to become a community member. So here's Gene going around the diamond. Now we all know Gene has been preaching and has been out there serving the community for a long time. At some point in his spiritual path, Gene decided that he wanted to serve contribute to the building of his local spiritual community. Now Gene may have done that in any number of ways. And then after several years of that or months of that, it's different for every individual, Gene felt the all-encompassing calling to go and preach the word of the Ascended Master's teachings. And so Gene went on to universal service, to evangelize, to do outreach, and has stumped in several nations around the world. That's an example of someone moving around the diamond. Now, we all know what Gene's doing today. He's not primarily evangelizing in this moment in his life. He has a different mission at the moment, which is strategic defense. It's not evangelizing. So where is Gene now? Gene is a community member. He has been trained to do universal service, but he's still a community member. He's not serving right now in the area of universal service, even though he's capable. Do you see what I'm saying? And if you could flip to your next page, I'd like to visit for you some of the things that are not included in this model, and you've probably already asked, where are they? First, you'll notice that the Keepers of the Flame fraternity is not included. It's not because we're dropping it. It's because we need more heartfelt consideration as to where it should go. Should it be combined with community membership? In other words, should every community member be a Keeper of the Flame? Or do we want to look at the Keepers of the Flame fraternity as a separate spiritual fraternity, and if so, how is it going to fit in with the model? We felt it was much too important a subject to just sort of throw it in without careful deliberation. There were hundreds of hours that went into preparing just a basic framework, and we felt that before we could move forward in some of these areas, we needed to we needed to give careful consideration to where they should go. For example, the Keepers of the Flame fraternity. Next, you'll notice that not all the sacraments are included in the model. You'll see baptism, marriage, anointing of the sick, and so forth. but some of the other sacraments are not yet included for the same reason. We felt we needed to study what the masters have said about these sacraments, what the messengers have taught us about the significance of these sacraments, before we simply plunk them in the model. Also, you'll notice there are no services on the model. No St. Germain service, Ascension service. All you'll notice is a worship service for Universal Fellowship. Again, there's been so much said by Mother and by the Masters on these different services that we needed to go back and look at what they have said, what is their significance, who should participate, what's required of them. For example, should we have classes to help introduce people to a St. Germain service? Should they have a class? Who is St. Germain? What is the St. Germain service about? What am I doing for the world or for the planet when I'm participating in a St. Germain service? Would that make participation in the service more meaningful for them? Would that help them become more committed to St. Germain service? These are the questions that we grappled with when we considered where should services go. Again, this is where we're inviting your feedback. I already mentioned about the church tenets. They might need to be split up or revisited in terms of the covenants that we'd like to create for the different areas. Over the years, the Masters and Mother have mentioned many holy orders to us: Order of the Good Samaritan, Order of the Sons and Daughters of Dominion, Order of the Golden Lily. Again, a lot of research we feel needs to be done on these in order to position them in the new model. As I also mentioned, the ordained ministry is not included here. This is not a model for becoming a minister necessarily, although those who choose the ministry as a vocation or feel that it's their calling certainly will have gone through or been trained at all of these different areas. We see the path of ordained ministry as separate from church affiliation. There's a whole separate course of study that those who see the ministry as their calling will need to take in order to become ministers. Also, remember the lifelong path of learning. That is not fully articulated. As I mentioned, it's a big job, and it's something that we need your feedback on. We haven't fully mapped out how you might move from the old model to the new one. In other words, if you're a keeper of the flame on lesson 20, where do you fit in? If you're a communicant, and as Jean has been associated with us for 20 years, where do you fit in? Well, you already all admitted that you needed to take Membership 101. But that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody's going to go back to Universal Fellowship. What it means is that we're all community members. Pretty much, I think it's fair to say, if we've been affiliated with the church for any length of time, we'll be a community member. If we agree to the community membership covenant, some people may decide that's not for them. But there may be some classes that we might want to go back and take in order to get up to speed or to facilitate, enhance our understanding. So you can consider then pretty much that most everybody will begin at least at community membership, which is the second side of the diamond, unless this is a new path to you and you may choose to affiliate at Universal Fellowship. In 1997, Archangel Michael said, "There is no such thing as standing still in this place. There's only that onward and upward. All of the forces of cosmos are moving in this moment. Are you to stand still? The challenge of the hour and the moment is to spiral upward and to know new vistas, not only of the heaven world, but of your own God-free being." So then, once again, here's the path of lifelong spiritual learning and application: self-awareness, self-knowledge, self-actualization, and self-transcendence. Now remember, this path is within every area of affiliation. Next slide. You can climb up the pyramid of being from any area. Now, it's conceived of that as we go through this diamond and through this pyramid, that we create a spinning action whereby we're actually climbing the 33 steps to the ascension. In fact, Mother said in the book, The Great White Brotherhood, Church Universal and Triumphant is a circular stairway that we take step by step. It presents the outline of the 33 initiations that are required of everyone who takes the ascension. And it presents a nucleus, an order, a foundation whereby we can take our families, our loved ones, our children, and give them the training that is necessary. That training is the lifelong path of spiritual learning that we'd like to create, is the foundation for people moving forward and moving upward in the spiral toward the ascension. On March of '97, John the Beloved said, May you yourselves work and work hard today to see to it that this organization and this worldwide church might also have that strength and that pressing into the earth of a solid connection with the new ways of teaching many to come into a higher level of genius, a higher level of performance, a higher level of understanding that there must be, from the heart of God and the great central sun to this earth, a city four square, the base of a pyramid, and the all-seeing eye at the top. We believe that the diamond represents the base of the pyramid, and that the pyramid of being is achieved through any area of affiliation, as we've already said. Now, I wanted to just make one point here, and that is that we recognize that we could not be where we are today without the participation, the steadfastness of hundreds of keepers of the flame who have served at this altar and served in the old model, decreeing hour after hour, week and year after year. It is through your dedication that we are where we are today, and therefore we would like to acknowledge that, acknowledge your participation and your givingness over many, many decades so that we could be where we are today to move forward in the next life cycle. In closing then, about this new model, remember, we have to show people every day how to walk and talk with God. We can do this through the lifelong path of spiritual learning and service. We want people to realize the benefits of enhanced spirituality. When one commits to a path of lifelong learning, he is taking personal responsibility for his own spiritual growth and fulfillment. If we want to be a participant in their process, and we do because we think we have the greatest teachings on the planet, then we must have a model or structure that facilitates their spiritual growth. We understand that people resist change, but the growth cannot occur without it. Transformation does not occur because we stay the same. Personal transformation only happens when we're ready to take a leap of faith. So we would like to call you to action tonight and in the weeks ahead to give us your feedback on this model. Tell us what you think. Remember, this is not a finished model. It's a model in the making, and it's your model. Remember, we need to take the burden off of Mother and take up the work that she has done for decades, preaching and teaching and helping others to achieve a one-on-one relationship with God. When we do this, we will self-actualize. We will achieve our highest potential. Mother has shown us the way. It's time for us to take up the torch and carry on that work. We have to know and articulate what we believe in. This new model is our opportunity to go out and teach, to go out and be love in action, to reach out in every way in the understanding of these teachings. We need to actualize our spiritual goals, what the Masters have been saying all these years. It's past time to be up and doing. We all have to come up higher and fulfill our reason for being. And this is our offering to you tonight. We believe that this is a beginning, this model is a beginning for us to set the sail of our course for the next phase of our journey. Thank you.
I'd like to give you a new model of affiliation and comments on the new model itself, and so I will begin. I hope you will take the time to think about this proposed model, which is still in the formative stage, and give us your valuable feedback. I'm very happy that we are moving in this direction. What I like about this structure is that it allows us to open our gates wider and wider, to share the Ascended Master's teachings. It also allows each of us to find greater ways to serve together and grow together. It allows us to network to accomplish our goals. And finally, the model compels us to create specific programs and materials for the step-by-step education of the heart, the mind, and the soul. As I was at my seat in the front row listening to Debra, I was reminded of three very, very special people. These are people who took it upon themselves, without having any prompting whatsoever, to accelerate the spiritual manifestations on earth. One of them was George Lancaster. George Lancaster had a farm somewhere in Southern California. Every year he'd arrive with a barrel of tomatoes and so forth. And he was a very good buddy of Mark Prophet. So George Lancaster was absolutely determined to make his ascension. He didn't know all the rules. He didn't know everything that is on these charts today. He just knew that he wanted to make his ascension. Every time he called me up, every time I heard from him, he'd say, "Do you think I'm going to make it? You think I'm going to make it?" I said, "Yes, George, you're going to make it." Then there was Leon Chagnon. Leon Chagnon was a very fine soul who was quite elderly. We had a little barbecue at one of the homes we have lived in over the years. He came, and so did many others. He was eating a hot dog and having a good time, and I looked at him, and I looked at the tremendous light in his eyes. I remembered having seen him in one of our services, and he had those eyes that said, "This man's going to ascend any minute. I'm going to have to put lead weights on him." And the third person that I can never forget, of course, is Clara Louise Kinninger. A very sweet soul, a very determined soul, one who upheld the nursing program in South America. And she had a very fierce discipline for her nurses, for anyone that she was working with. I went to South America recently, and pictures of her were there, and everyone remembered her, and it was a tremendous experience. Not one of these people went by the book. That's what I wanted to tell you. None of them went by the book. They said to themselves, thinking that they said to themselves, "How do I get there?" Then they figured out how, and all three of them made their ascension in this particular embodiment. So I think it's very important to know that you don't have to go by the book to have your victory every day, because it's the love in your heart and the joy in your heart that is going to teach you that way. So this model allows us, each of us, to find greater ways to serve together and grow together. It allows us to network to accomplish our goals. And finally, the model compels us to create specific programs and materials for the step-by-step education of the heart, the mind, and the soul. Please remember this, it's the heart, the mind, and the soul. But this model and this vision will only work if we, each and every one of us, infuse it with the Spirit. This we have to write down also, because we cannot simply have empty vessels. We have to have vessels that are filled and full, that are there. At the heart of this model and at the heart of this movement is one goal: spiritual self-transcendence. If we are not endowing our words and our works with an exceptional light, then we are going to be just another church. Even the marvelous church that has from 7,000 to 10,000 people in Orange County, if they don't have the endowment of words and works, will they make their ascension? Will they find the violet flame? Will they enter the Holy Spirit? I pray that they do. But we need to make certain that we do for sure. None of us wants Church Universal and Triumphant to be just another church. It was too hard to get there, to let go of it. We have to have our church, and we can't accept that it's going to be just another church. We should be able to see that church in heaven looking down upon us, as all the angels are there also looking down upon us. We want it to be a dynamic spiritual force that partners with God for world change, But collectively, we cannot be agents of change unless individually we become chalices for greater and greater levels of light. As Gilbert might say, we must first become independent in God before we can become interdependent in a community of the Holy Spirit. How true it is. This is what I call spiritual self-transcendence. We are no longer the mere Homo sapien. We are becoming eternal beings in the octaves of light, little by little and in greater spirals of tremendous power. Yes, we live in a physical body. Yes, we are made of matter of flesh and blood, but we do not have to remain mere Homo sapiens. We've been them too long. We can become extraordinary spiritual beings. And I'm not talking about sometime in the far distant future. I'm talking about right now, today. This is my mission in life. I don't want to have this mission go out from under me and I go into the octaves of light without having that mission done. I am here. I've planted my feet in this earth. I don't intend to leave. I'm telling you this. I am not intending to leave. So I have 3 points here to help people stop thinking of themselves as mere humans and start thinking of themselves as spiritual beings. All you have to do is turn the dial and realize that somehow somebody somewhere has convinced us that we are just human beings, mere human beings at that. Our mission is to help people recreate themselves in the image and likeness of God, to show them the possibilities for spiritual self-transcendence. I don't know where I got this idea, but I know I got it when I was a very small child. And I got that idea that I was going to live forever, that I had lived forever in the distant past, and I would live forever in the distant future. And I have never forgotten that conviction. I want to give everyone I meet a vision of the reality that seems to play hide and seek with us, a vision of the awesome dimensions of being and selfhood that lie just beyond our physical sight. Most people on earth do not really see, quote. We walk around as blind men, blind to our own inner divinity, blind to our vast potential, blind to the angels and adepts who walk in our very midst as our spiritual mentors. I tell you as never before, you can touch the hem of the garment of angels and ascended masters. Try it. Go for it. You're going to find out that that garment is there. Maybe it's invisible, but you're going to touch it. And you're going to touch it one of these days, and it's going to be very soon. Because I'm a prophet, and I'm telling you, it's going to come soon. And I'm telling you that you do have what it takes through your Holy Christ self to walk and talk with God. You can reach out to other souls with a sacred touch that heals their bodies and their souls. You can paint for them the vision of spiritual self-transcendence, and we can walk the earth in that self-transcendence now. How do we begin the process of self-transcendence? The starting point is to see matter as merely a stepping stone to spirit, and that's all. Matter is not an end in itself, but a stepping stone to higher consciousness. Our proposed model of affiliation is not an end in itself either. The model is a stepping stone to spiritual growth. It is a framework that allows us to pursue a deeper connection with the divine and a deeper connection with each other. This structure, when it is mature, will help us mature our own creative potential. It can help us get further along the path together. than we could ever make it alone. But in order for the structure and the process to work, we must become chalices for the Holy Spirit. I want to tell you that I know that the Holy Spirit is with us. I know that the Holy Spirit is in me. I know what it is to have the pain of the Holy Spirit as well as the tremendous descent of the Holy Spirit. And so this is something, because I've experienced it and experienced it very recently, that I can give to you. And I can give to you the teaching of the Holy Spirit, and I can give you the understanding of the transformation of yourself through the Holy Spirit. And this, to me, is one of the greatest callings that all of us could ever have. Matter must be endowed with the Spirit. Without that endowment, we are nothing. In his Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said, "Ye are the light of the world. A city that is set on an hill cannot be hid. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick. And it giveth light unto all that are in the house. Let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven." In this sublime statement, Jesus defines practical spirituality. Let your light shine before men. Of course it's practical, because Jesus knows that if he turns out the light's not going to shine and the people are not going to see his practical spirituality. And so he tells us, let your light shine before men by doing good works that glorify God. What is this light that shines before men? Yes, what is it? What is this great light that we are finally seeing through? It's the light of the heart. It's the threefold flame. It's that magnificent chalice that has been in our hearts for thousands of years. Above all, we need to stoke the fires of the heart. Our heart should literally be a chalice for sacred fire. If we do nothing else in our day, we must increase the fires of the heart day by day. We all have so many details to attend to in a day, and they are worthy details. But let us not get lost in the morasses of life. Our first priority must be spiritual self-transcendence. Only at that level are we reaching Godward. Are we reaching for our aim, going to those levels where there are temples of light and etheric levels where we can learn and come back and give tremendous feedback to our brethren on earth. We have to value this above all else. At the end of our day, we must ask ourselves, what did I do today to transcend myself, to come up another notch from where I was yesterday? And if I didn't transcend myself, then why not? What tools did I forget to pick up out of my toolbox to help me self-transcend? The practical spiritual tools are key. Without practicality, there is no spirituality. Did you ever think about that? We have to be practical before we can be spiritual. The great lights of East and West tell us that. We must marry the Word of God to the work of God. Tibetan Buddhism teaches a bodhisattva, who is a Buddha to be, is revealed by what he does. Now and then over the years, I thought that somehow I needed to sit in a lotus posture and simply meditate. So I'm very much gratified that one can do great works if one is reaching to be a bodhisattva. In one Buddhist sutra, Gautama admonishes his disciples, "Though you have heard much of my teaching, you have failed to win the holy fruit of Buddhahood." On hearing this, Ananda, one of Gautama's chief disciples, realizes that he has not followed the injunction of the Buddha to become the teaching. So the sutra says, when Ananda heard Gautama's solemn teaching, he became very sorrowful, and with tears falling, with forehead, hands and feet touching the ground, he paid homage to the Lord. Then kneeling, he said, "Noble Lord, Since I determined to follow thee and become thy disciple, I have always thought that I could rely upon thy supernormal strength, and that it would not be difficult to put thy teaching into practice. I expected that the Lord would favor me with an experience of samadhi in this body. Although I have become a disciple of Buddha, my heart is not yet absorbed in enlightenment. I am like a prodigal son who has forsaken his father. I now see that in spite of my learning, if I am not able to put into practice, I am no better than an unlearned man. It is like a man talking about food, but never eating and becoming satisfied. Ananda continues, we are all entangled in these two hindrances, knowledge and learning, and vexation and suffering. End of quote by Ananda. So there are always two parallel tracks on the spiritual path, the word and the work. The work is the word in action. The work is the word in action. The book of James gives a teaching on these parallel tracks that should be the keynote of all of our spiritual endeavors. If you remember only one thing today, remember the message of James, the apostle. James says, "Wherefore, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. For the wrath of man worketh not the righteousness of God. Wherefore lay apart all filthiness and superfluity of naughtiness, and receive with meekness the engrafted word, which is able to save your souls." 2,000 years ago, James the Apostle knew what the Lord meant when he used the words engrafted word. It's almost like we have to be engrafted in our flesh, in our skin, in our hearts, in our minds, so that we can accelerate and go up the spiral staircase above and beyond that level of our humanness and into the higher levels of God consciousness. But be ye doers of the word, and not hearers only, deceiving your own selves. For if any man be a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like unto a man beholding his natural face in a glass. For he beholdeth himself and goeth his way, and straightway forgetteth what manner of man he was. But whoso looketh into the perfect law of liberty, and continueth therein, he being not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the work, this man shall be blessed in his deed. We must engraft the Word of God upon our hearts, so that our hearts become sacred and ennobled by the very Word itself. Become doers of the Word, says James. We have to move beyond merely listening to and intellectually savoring the messages the Masters have given us. We have to become the message, and we can become the message. Believe me, I promise you, you can become the message 24 hours a day. This is what spiritual self-transcendence is all about, and in reality, this is what world transcendence is all about. For as Mahatma Gandhi once said, you must be the change you wish to see in the world. So again, I encourage you to give us your feedback on how you think we can improve this model, this chalice for the Spirit and the Word that we are creating, that we are crafting. Think about what part you can play. How can you help us define and refine this new process? How can you help endow the structure with the Holy Spirit and with practicality? And how can we help you achieve greater self-transcendence? Our mission is a grand one, to publish and apply the teachings of the Ascended Masters in order to restore the original one-on-one relationship between the soul and God, and to liberate the souls of planet Earth. It is a vision of self-transcendence and world transcendence. It is a vision of self-transcendence and world transcendence. I cannot do it alone. The executive board cannot do it alone. The headquarters staff cannot do it alone. The teaching centers and study groups cannot do it alone. Keepers of the flame, I cannot do this alone. Will you help me make it a reality? Yes. Thank you.